Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Global Alliance's Health and Wellbeing Month regional webinar for Asia Pacific. I'm Jenny Muir. I am the Chair of Health and Wellbeing Month for the Global Alliance for Public Relations and Communication Management, and your moderator for today. We are jumping in. This is an extension of our commitment to mental health and wellbeing of our profession globally. Health and Wellbeing Month is January every year. And last year we kicked off with some research and a collaboration with the World Health Organization. And this year what we're doing is we're recognizing that in each of the regions that Global Alliance operates in, we have a different experience and approach to mental health and wellbeing, and that is informed by our diverse cultural experiences, as well as our beliefs, our diversity in the way that we think and the way that we operate. What is common to all of us on today's webinar is that we all work in public relations and communication at some level in diverse workplaces. So today, the purpose of the webinar is we're going to have a safe and respectful conversation. We have about mental health and wellbeing in our workplaces, being public relations and communications management workplaces. And as professionals, there's a real commitment to learning, reflecting on our experiences and adapting our workplace practices. We're focusing today's conversation on reducing stigma and increasing a shared understanding, increasing mental health literacy and help seeking, strengthening our awareness of our employer and leadership responsibilities, and to really encourage you to build learning and knowledge into your professional development around these topics. We're going to try and answer questions as we can if you put them in the chat, but we've got a pretty packed conversation. I want to introduce you to our three other contributors. Julie Gillespie, wave Julie, is the founder of Well-Led Workplaces and a mental health first aid principal master instructor. She draws on her lived experience of mental ill health and 8 years of training leaders. Her focus is on the shared conditions, the language that we use, and leadership practices. Joining us from Indonesia is Dr. Nia Sarinastiti. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Nia is a senior advisor for Accenture Development Partnerships. She's also a very well-known leader of 30 years in both academia and professional practice across the world and in Indonesia. And I'd like to introduce you to Adrian Cropley. He's the co-founder of the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence and also a fellow board member of mine. So before the four of us jump in, I'd like to just get you to reflect on what's your starting point for coming to this webinar today. How much do you know about mentally healthy workplaces or mental health in your workplace? And how much do you know about what contributes to and supports good mental health and what is detrimental, both to your culture, to your whole workplace, and also to your individual mental health? Today, we are going to be sharing some personal and lived experiences of poor mental health workplaces, and by way of helping you to connect to some incidences or behaviours that you may have experienced yourself or have seen happen in your workplaces. So we're trying to have a deep listening exercise, very much respectful of the sharing of people's stories. So just for a scene setting exercise for you, 91% of PR professionals globally report poor mental health in the past year. That is so far outside of our general population's experience of poor mental health that we've got to look at our work practices and our workplaces as a contributing factor to that. And we know that the way that we work, the pressures that we put on ourselves and are put on us, expectations, the levels of stress need to change, and they need to change culturally within our workforces, across our whole profession, and particularly in our individual workplaces. They're not, it's not one area of our profession over another, it's profession-wide. So these mentally healthy workplaces are shaped by systems, by our culture, both our country's culture and the culture within the workplace. They're shaped by leadership. And it's learning is the only way that we can walk ourselves away from that 91%. So the way we're going to do today is a bit of a rolling discussion, but we're going to jump off with Julie first. And I just want to kind of contextualize this for you. We're talking about the realities and pressures of the workplace, but it's going to be helpful for you to appreciate language. You'll see us use language really carefully because it means specific things. We don't want it, and this is our profession. So we want to be very specific and deliberate with the language we use so it doesn't all get mushed into one big pot. So over to Julie. Julie's going to share a screen and do a bit of scene setting for us, and then she and I will jump into a conversation.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Jen. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And when we were talking earlier about this, it was really important for us to define what mental health is so we're on the same page. Because prior to 8 years ago, I didn't have language around this. And it took having my fourth breakdown to be able to go, I can't do this anymore. And so the work that I do now is really centered in this space of being able to create access to the language. Because this definition, which I'm sharing with you now, is what changed everything in my world. And so I just want to walk you all through it because it's a really interesting definition that we can work with here. So this is from our World Health Organization, and they state that mental health is a state of well-being, or as I say to my dad, it's a state of being well. And it's the aspects that contribute to that wellness on an everyday basis. And so when we see this, it's in which every individual realizes their own potential. And I want to pause here because it's those things that you do that you're good at. In your profession, the thing that you pick up every day to do, what you've trained for, what you've learnt, what you do the extension work for, the things that, make you feel good when you do them well. That's realizing your own potential. Can cope with the normal stresses of life. Now, I have no idea what normal is anymore. I don't. Yet our brain has these ways of being able to normalize. They do, that's what protects us, what keeps us safe, it keeps us steady and keeps us going back into danger zones to be able to make the change that we know needs to be made in support of our community. Until it can't, and that's a different story. Let's continue here though, because when we can work productively and fruitfully, that's not only are we being productive and doing the work, but we're hitting the goals, we're having those wins. And I come from manufacturing. So originally I was a cosmetic chemist. So I created hair care products, which is a product that puts on a shelf, you buy, you sell, and that's fruitfulness in visual format. Nowadays, most of my work is service and training, delivery and coaching in those aspects. And it's a really different type of fruitful. So I've had to really negotiate with myself what fruitfulness is. So I can go, yeah, I've done a really good job. And the next component is able to make contribution to their community. Now, what you all do listening to this today is create huge contributions to your communities on an everyday basis in being able to communicate the hard things, in being able to bring people on board into visions, being able to change how people view the world around them. It's a huge contribution that you do. And it's that idea of wherever you turn up, in whatever communities you turn up into, to add value, you are valued. Oftentimes we wait around for people to say, hey, you're valued. But I want to change that and say, wherever you add value, you are valued. Now, when we do this work, when we unpack this, it changes this idea of what mental health is. It becomes conditions, environments, as well as our perception of what it is that's happening in and around us. What it frames up is how well we function. So I just want to step into this lightly. So this is our mental health continuum. And instead of putting in there healthy on one end and unhealthy on the other, which brings us into that binary kind of view of things, what we're talking about here is positive, healthy functioning and severe impact on everyday functioning. And when we see it in this way, we change our language around it. So what I want to put to you, though, is that we move through this and fluctuate through this all the time. We have hard days that kind of tip us. We have different things that go on. There's loss, there's grief, there's change, there's having a tantrum, there's a kid having a tantrum. There's all of these things happening in and around us. And what they do is that they get us tipping. They tip us out of our green zone. We get into that yellow-orange zone. And then what do we do to get back? Because this is where we start learning the lessons that we can't generally learn when we're comfortable, right? So this is where I've put in that space underneath of those situations happen. This is where we invite you to get a bit of awareness. What is the situation? Do I know it? Can I put a finger on it? Because if I know what it is, I can do something about it. And when there's the idea then of self-awareness of how's this making me feel? Like there are situations I'm in where it makes me angry. Well, guess what? I should be angry. That's the appropriate feeling here, and so I'm going to own that. Or it might be sad, it might be devastated, but name it, know it for what it is, because then too, we can also do something with that in terms of processing and being able to navigate it. And that's where our resources come into play. How do we process those emotions? We don't process them by sitting down and doom scrolling through, what other people are up to. We process them by looking up. We process them by going for a walk. We process them by being active, by eating good food, by connecting in with the people around us, by doing something. Making a plan for it is still also doing something, but we need to at one moment get up and lean into it. And then down the bottom there it's really important, it's support. It's the stuff that keeps us steady and it keeps us taking those actions to take steps forward. And oftentimes we feel we're the only one feeling these things. And I want to let you know that you're not alone, that there are many of us out there who really struggle with the everyday and continue to. And until we find that language, until we look up and see another human who's also in that position, we're not tapping into these supports. We're going to feel alone. So support can be in the terms of someone who's got your back, someone who you can talk to, someone you can have a rant with and just go, I'm so angry because da 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 is happening. And they just go, you've got this. Yep, right. What are you going to do about it? So this is the types of things that when we're talking about mental health that we can lean into that has us moving back into that green zone. Lesson learned, tick. Thank you very much. I'll have a little bit of recovery time. Thank you. So these are the two things that when we bring it together, our language around how we turn up in mental health and how we even describe our mental health get to change. It's no longer have or have not or together or broken, because that's what I grew up with. It's now the conditions I'm in are really tough and it's making me really frustrated. What am I going to do? Who can help? What's my resource? It's a real shift.
Thank you, Julie. Can we go back to full screen and we'll jump into this conversation? So I hope that sort of sets the scene for everybody. What we want to talk about is, we've got across Asia Pacific and the ASEAN, we've got billions of people from such diverse cultures, such different languages, different religions, different between cities and rural and farming. We've got people who live in traditional settings and have very, very different rules of law and ways in which they interact with each other. But for our profession, we are a knowledge profession. We have technical skills that change all the time. So that's the commonality for all of us. But all of those environmental conditions impact quite significantly on the way that our workplaces function, the way that we interact with individuals within the workplace, with our clients, with our stakeholders. The whole thing is influenced by those environmental factors. So what to you, Julie, as we kick conversation off, is what mental health pressures are the most common, you think, for this region, given the diversity of the region? And I'm conscious that you're coming from Australia as well.
Yeah. But I'm also multicultural, so I'm three passports. That kind of, I don't have a singular country of home. Like my parents were first immigrants, their parents were first immigrants, their parents were first immigrants. So it's like, so I've got good passports. The commonality that we can start to share is having a look at what are the biological aspects, the psychological aspects, and the social aspects. And when we start to have a look at, what are some of these biological things, being human gives us the common ground, right? We all have these biological aspects of epigenetics. We have hormones, age, gender, whether there's disability, pain, good nutrition or not. Like these are some of the things that are in there that can increase risk of problems or be protective factors. So, for example, for myself, I'm a 52-year-old woman that is experiencing that time of life quite heavily, and the impacts that has on mental health is really significant. But I know why that is. So I can put controls and measures that are biological in place to support it. The next one is psychological, and I think that's what you're speaking to most, Jennifer, when you're talking about all of these cultures and regions and how we frame it is learnt behaviors. Those ways that we learn how to think about ourselves and our community. It's the voices we hear as we grow up about if we're doing well or if we're not doing well. Those aspects, because we all have parents that have told us something about ourselves that we still believe to be true today. And so that's a common ground. And when we put into place the things that happen to us as humans, then those are the factors that also impact our well-being and our ability to think well. And then social. There's common grounds, even though there's so much, disparity between where we're all at. I've had so many beautiful opportunities of rooms of doing mental health first aid training where we've had 20 people in a room from 20 different countries originally. And it's phenomenal because it's like how do we talk about this together so we're all on the same page? And when we unpack this biological, psychological, social, we start seeing these really kind of common pressures that we feel socially about fitting in. Being able to live in the expectations that we believe to be true from the society. Media, I'm not even going to frame it as social media. Like the things that we look to in and around us that inform us of how we exist and, contribute. That accommodation, socioeconomical, like what it comes down to, these three factors, I start calling them soup. They're our kitchen soup. We all have kitchen soup and it's all different. I don't even know what's in all of my kitchen soup, but it's there. Some days it's a stinky old sock being put in there. I didn't do it, someone else did. Or it's a bit spicy. It changes all the time because we're changing all of the time. And that is something we definitely have in common because we're human. We're existing in a world where there's a lot happening to us in who we're learning from. And the interactions we're having on a regular basis is no longer so much segmented to country, territory, community, household, because we're a global community. we're all seeing what's happening out there in the world and being affected and impacted by it.
Thank you. I just want to, Nia, do you mind if I just pass the question to yourself from an Indonesian perspective? What do you think culturally, and from, because you're such a diverse country in your own right, what do you think is the understanding of mental health in the workplace from Indonesia, from your experience?
Okay, thanks. So, yeah, Indonesia is quite diverse, and I believe that it's not across the board that everybody understands what it is. And in communities where it's not metropolitan or big cities or where the businesses are, people who have mental health are actually isolated or not, are or hidden from the community because they feel that they're embarrassed. So they do not. There is issues where there are people who are still being locked in the room, cannot do anything, not being able to. So there is a spectrum, a large spectrum where maybe the big cities understand where it is, especially if companies are coming in as a multinational, where they have programs that are already given from the book to understand that mental wellness is something that's quite important for productivity. But on the other hand, where it's very traditional, it may not be something that people will willing to handle.
Thank you, Nia. I just wanted to, because the contrast for us across this region is really sort of the underpinning thing of this conversation. And I think that's the experience of all cultures and communities but when you get into a workplace and you've homogenized a group of human beings together, they're bringing all of their life experiences into the workplace, including their culture, be it traditional and all of their beliefs and their values. They're all coming into the workplace together, and that can create challenges in the starting point of being able to understand the way in which people's mental health and well-being needs to be supported, even the openness in which you have the conversation and be able to identify and discuss and support all has a different starting point. But I think from Global Alliance's perspective, it's a necessity in order for our profession to grow and flourish and thrive, and for all of us to contribute and to be acknowledged for that contribution without some of the traditional workplace practices that our profession has deployed over the many decades.
Can
Julie,
I just jump?
Yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
do you mind if I jump in there? Just because as you were talking through that, it prompted some of the comments, because I've worked across the Asia Pacific region for many, many years, and certainly in senior roles and managing teams across the region. It was so vastly important to identify how people needed support and make it culturally sensitive to them, because, I come from an English background, and one of the things that you generally get there is you don't talk about your emotions. You just get on. It's the British stiff upper lip and away you go. And I came a cropper on that a number of years ago, and I might share that in a little while. But every culture is very unique in terms of, as Julie was talking about, those support mechanisms that people need. And so what we've got to do, and what I found I needed to do as a manager of teams across Asia Pacific, is really identify what were the best support mechanisms for them. It wasn't, you could sit in the team and say, right, we're going to have a sharing, half an hour or so we can all share our stories of how we're feeling. Well, that's just not culturally applicable to some of the backgrounds. So it might be more the quiet time they need, or the one-on-ones, or other activities that help support them in the workplace. So the biggest thing that I think I've learned in the years working with teams across the region and across the globe is finding or using your team to help say, how do we support your mental health and security within an organization? What are the things that you need and how do we support it? And, what is it that's absolutely applicable for you? And then implementing that into the way that we approach this with our teams.
Yeah, definitely. There's no generic, everybody is the same, right? So you need to understand each context.
Yeah, exactly right. And that kind of nicely segues, Julie, into what are our cultural expectations about how they affect people's ability or inability to feel safe and speak up. Safety, and we're going to get to safety sort of in a bit, but I think that we just need to appreciate, and when I say cultural, I mean workplace culture, but of course, we all bring, as I just said, we all bring all of ourselves into the workplace, including our culture outside of the workplace. So how do you think that affects how people speak up? What are the mindsets and I guess the systems and frameworks?
Okay, to bring this in, it's this idea of no matter what workplace we're in, someone needs to go first. And, start those conversations. I remember when we did some work, I think it was just as COVID was starting, and it was 2020, and we brought out information around how to manage and reduce the noise around, mental health in the workplace. And we were speaking to Malaysia and India about mental health, but we went in talking about being well. And we took out the mental health aspect to it. We didn't ask anyone, we just made that assumption, right? And it was partway through that session, someone said to me, "Hey, Julie, are you talking about mental health?" And I was like, "Yeah, I am." And they said, "Well, just say it because we need to learn this language." And it's like, okay, so long as everyone's happy, and everyone just thumbs up it and just went, have at it. So we reset and we started talking about what mental health is, what this thing is. And the way we described it before, it's not about something that's in your head that's making you unwell. It's how we're challenged around us. But someone needs to go first. And, to be able to say, hey, you know what? I struggle with something. I was wondering if I could have a hand with it. This situation, I don't know what to do. And being able to sometimes say those things out loud and be first. We spoke about this before, Jennifer, about how significant it is when a leader stands up and says, you know what, I've been struggling for a really long time with something, and I really want to get your help on being able to make this easier for me, but I also think it'll make it easier for everyone else.
Yeah, thank you for prompting me. I'll share that story because I think that this audience will be either quite surprised, and I'm personally quite proud. So a couple of years ago, in my role at the National Mental Health Commission, we were approached because we were the Australian Agency for Mental Health. We're approached by the Foreign Minister of Brunei. I'll just use the shortened English name for it. And he asked our Foreign Minister if Australia's lead agencies could help him in reforming the mental health system of Brunei. He, at the time, was the chair of the ASEAN, and Brunei had that chair spot. And it struck us as very unusual for a foreign minister to reach out like that. And then he got on a call, because we were in COVID. He got on a call with us and his chief psychiatrist and advisors and shared with us the reason why he wanted to do this. And this is a very, very unusual thing to happen, but gratefully, it's actually happening more and more. He shared that while he is doing all the things he's doing as the Foreign Minister of Brunei, he has very, very serious panic attacks. And he sought permission from the Sultan to share this story and to use this as the anchor point to motivate the ASEAN members to prioritise mental health in the year that he was leading, that they were chairing ASEAN. and also to use it as an anchor point to reform Brunei's health system from top to bottom, so that it had a whole new mental health system. And although the country has a small number of citizens in comparison to all the other countries in the ASEAN, this kind of leadership, but this kind of self-desire and commitment to reveal his own challenges as a way to motivate and galvanize his country and that leadership struck us so strongly that we provided all the resources we could, and the country still does through bilateral trade agreement. But just as an example of the setting was right, he wanted to lead on this issue, and he wanted to be seen from his cultural perspective, all aspects of his cultural perspective, to be showing that this needed to be done. So I just share that as a way of explaining how somebody has to go first.
Mm. And I just want to point out a few really critical pieces in there for us all, is that it's not someone getting up on a stage and saying, without any precursor or structure or strategy, I have panic attacks. It's someone who's been really focused on being able to do it in a way that supports the betterment of their community as a result. And that takes strategy. That takes conversations up front with people who know what this stuff is. Being able to understand the frameworks of support and protective factors, and being able to see what is going on and what good looks like. Now, how can I stand with those things that look good and open my arms up to my community and say, hey, I think it's time we spoke about these things. And that's what we're looking at here. And it's not just the blasting out of me, pick me, I've got this challenge. No, because guess what? All humans have mental health challenges because we've got life. and life's not easy, right? So, and what is it? 45% of the Australian population will have a diagnosable mental illness in their lifetime. So 100% affected will be affected by it one way or another. So it's not just the proclamation, it's like, what's the strategy? What does good look like? How can I do this in a way that supports, not hurts those around me?
Yeah. And I think one of the things you have often talked about is what did I learn from that? What's the experience and what can I take away from that helps me down the path? Because I found, through my life and the first time I actually stepped into realizing that there was a mental health challenge, I was in my late 20s. Now, you go through all the teenage stuff, and that's always thrown off as hormones and all sorts of things, but they're real serious issues. But you kind of get through those, and it's sometimes the things that kind of catch you off guard, that you haven't dealt with things or you haven't had those support mechanisms and so on. Because I always remember that the first time I had a challenge, I was sitting in my lounge room at 9 o'clock one night in my late 20s with a bottle of vodka and a packet of sleeping pills. And I went, there's something not quite right here. And I'm glad I looked at it that particular way and ended up reaching out to a friend and, as you say, looking for that support and whatever. But that's something I would never, ever have disclosed in the workplace. And what I found moving through that is I'm going to work having severe depression, and that's what it ended up being from not tackling some of the deep-seated issues of the past and grief and all of those kinds of things. But I found the time that you then start preparing to talk about things or share is because you feel you can no longer hide it, or you think it's a bit like the pimple on the nose, everybody can see it. And the first time I started talking about, look, I'm having these challenges, and I did it in a way where it's like, I don't want you to do anything about it. I'm not trying to go poor me, but I just need to let you know. And they went, I would never have picked it, kind of stuff. But you think it's like this glowing pimple on the end of your nose. But the big lesson from that is the So what did I learn from that experience? What got me to the place that I was at? What were the triggers? And then you start identifying those in the future. And in fact, it makes you a much more resilient person for it, because you've experienced the darkness and then you come back out into the light and go, yeah, I do have dark times. And that's part of having that illness. But majority of the time, it's what you've learned from it and how you do. And that, I think, made me a better manager, because I could see the signs for people, or when they started talking about it, I was able to share a lot more. And so I think these things are really important.
Adrian, the self-awareness piece is, you know, any person who is a leader, not just a manager, has as its kind of at its core. The self-reflection and self-awareness is a really strong component, and it comes from life.
Yes. And life, you know, life sometimes deals some really hard blows, and I don't think there's anybody that's not watching today that has worked for an organization where they go, oh my God, how did I stay in that organization? And you get paralyzed by the toxicity of an organization that doesn't deal with psychological safety. In fact, they weaponize it to make sure they get the best.
And they're trauma bonded.
I like that one.
Yeah, I want to bring it back a second. Adrian, I think it's great when we talk about, mental illness and, the experiences with illness. And I want to put to you in that reminder of everyone experiences the challenges. And so when we're looking at ways across this region to have this conversation and to really, embed the practice of mentally healthy workplaces, it's talking about what protects us. What does good look like? How do we want to be treated? What are these things that we need to be able to perform at our best? I don't need a lot. I just need someone to give me a bit of clarity and, here's your guardrails, have at it, kid. Can't really call myself a kid anymore, but, it would be nice. And when it comes to the, moments of someone saying to me, if something gets in your way, let's have a conversation because my job is to remove the barriers so you can do your best. That's a mental health conversation.
Yeah. It's a good segue, Julie. I'm noting time for us. So from the research that we've got across our profession, stress is the most common issue reported by our profession. 78% of our profession experience stress on a daily basis. Then it followed by anxiety and low mood. So they're clinically defined scenarios that they have such an interdependency, the stress, anxiety, and low mood. So we really want to look at what the workplace norms are that are contributing to that, and also look at the cultural and legal frameworks within workplaces, and we're going to jump into that. But before we do that, I think that everybody nodded when I said stress. And Adrian, you've already identified sort of that living with depression is a thing that you've kind of had to learn and identify. If you want, are you comfortable, Adrian, in sharing? You've got a couple of very specific experiences that I think the reason why, firstly, for our audience, and we center people's lived experience in the way that we approach this topic, because you can connect to those personal experiences more easily because you've lived through them as well, or other people. So we've asked some of us to share some of these experiences that are workplace related, and we're all practicing professionals, so of many years. So I've asked, Adrian's very comfortable to share some of these experiences, and Nia is going to as well from a different perspective. But I'll hand it over to you, Adrian.
Thanks for that, Jenny. And particularly when it relates to stress and then what then happens as a result of that stress not managed. And I put myself into the position because I've been consulting now for over 20 years, and it was dealing with a client. Now, the client's always right, and all of those that lovely little narratives that we like to tell ourselves. But I was dealing with a client in a professional services sector, and we were doing major relocation change, and I was the head of change. And so of all the people, I was helping people through that process of going through change. And it was huge relocations that we were doing in organizations, which sometimes brings some really interesting behaviors. But because I'm trained at dealing with those and helping identify some of those issues through lived experience, it positioned me to help support people in the organization. The problem that I had, though, is personally, I was working with a project manager who was basically losing control of her emotions through this project. And so it was really identified that she was not dealing with things at all well. And she would find people to take it out of. I was one of them. So I would go into work one day and it was, oh my God, I'm so glad you're here. I don't know what I would do without you. And by lunchtime, she would tell you you're the complete utter screw up. And I don't know why we hired you and we should sack you. And then you would get the whole range in between. Now, you can write off some of those things, and it started pushing up the anxiety and things like that because it was trying to find ways to deal with this person, plus help support the team around that was also getting those behaviors. So I realized that the stress levels were going up quite a lot around this because every day was this different conversation, working really long hours on it, trying to please this project manager that was never happy, or she was losing control and having tears one day. So you were trying to move from being the supportive person to being the punching bag. And I must say, and I'll share this as an experience. I was walking to work one day because I could walk to work. I lived in the city. And I had to turn. If anybody's ever been to Melbourne, there's a lovely main street called Swanston Street, and Collins Street is the street going the other way, which is quite a main street. And I got to the corner of Swanston and Collins, and I stood there, and I could not move my body to turn and go up the street to the office. And I went, well, this is quite unusual. And so I stood there, and every time I went to move, I could not physically move. And I went, okay, I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to go to the doctor and said, hey, funny thing happened on the way to work today. It ended up being anxiety brought on by the stresses of work. Lesson number 2, right? So live with a base condition with depression, but then you add anxiety, which we all go through and have been through, but you've got to look for the signs that is telling you something is not quite right. So how do we put the things in place before it gets to that? Because it's a bit like a pressure cooker. It keeps building up, and you're either going to go completely letting off steam, or it's all bottled up inside and your body will take over. And that's what happened. And that led to anxiety or panic attacks. So again, that was that lesson learned, but it helped me down the track. And even just a couple of years ago, when I worked for a client that was using what I call that weaponizing psych attitude of, I'm going to put you down, dismiss you, tell you you're not valuable to the organization, you realize as much as you're prepared, that's going to have an effect on you. So I think the biggest lessons you learn is, how do you release that pressure valve before something happens to you physically? Because that physical and mental state are interconnected, well and truly. So you've got to start looking out. So again, going back to some of the things that Julie was talking about, is those support mechanisms, but also what other resources do you have? Do you do your exercise? Do you make sure you do some breathing? Do you go punching bags, at night in the gym? What are the things that you can put into place? Because it has that detrimental process if we don't deal with them. Now, I know through that first example that I shared about this, the toxic manager, she had issues. It wasn't her fault. She had these issues. I was trying to understand that. But most importantly, it was about everybody else is going through it. So if I'm experiencing it, how do I create an environment where we can support them at the same time? So it's really putting those things in place.
On reflection, because that was quite a few years ago, how do you think, or what would you have liked to have seen from your employer, your workplace as such, for you to be able to feel safe enough to go back into that workplace and say, hey, XYZ, we have a big problem, and we need your help to deal with it. And I know this is like decades have gone past, and there's a lot of awareness that, and workplace culture has changed quite a lot. But if you don't mind sort of having a reflection on that, that would be helpful.
Yeah. No, that's a really important question, because it is that reflection you need. Now, I know post-project, as I was doing a wrap-up as a consultant, I made it my mission to talk to this person's manager and say, this person needs help. Psychologically, they need absolute help. There's something seriously going on with them. The manager's response was, I'm so surprised you lasted this long. Now, that told me a lot to the organization's ability to help support people and their psychological safety in the organization. Yeah. And so it made me think long and hard that I will never work for an organization again that does not have practices in place where it's led from the top in terms of the organization. So a clear message that I got out of that one is ensuring that this is supported from the top down and listened to from the bottom up as well, is that you've got to have that information flowing that is about how healthy is the organization when it comes to supporting people. Because absolutely, if this was a work site, like a construction site, we measure to the nth degree how many accidents are on site and how many deaths we have in a year. Yeah. We're not doing that either at all or not very much in a lot of workplaces to measure that mental health aspect and that psychological safety. And it is so critical that we put those things in place from the management. You should be able to have a conversation to get support for somebody that is obviously having an effect on the rest of the workplace. And it's not...
And needs support, yeah.
And needs support. And it's not just because they're a really bad person or whatever. Generally, people don't set out to be bad people. There's a couple of exceptions, but the reality is that they need that support, and they may not have all of the support and resources that they have available.
Just to add in there quickly, Adrian, they don't actually have the language for it.
Yes, you're right. Yeah. You're right. We don't like
because this is a language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know,
and
also
when we have
don't
that feel supported, don't have a culture or a trust in the culture that they're sitting in, that they can be safe enough to actually put their hand up and go, hey, I'm not doing well.
Yep, absolutely.
I think the problem is that previously they don't this is not our problem, it's your problem.
Yes, that's right, Nia. That is very much you take your problem and you deal with it in your own time, and don't bring it to work. But how many hours of our life do we work?
Yeah, that's right. How many times have you heard, I'm stressed? Well, maybe you need to take some time out of your leave to do it, get yourself sorted out before coming back. Why aren't we going, what have we done to contribute to that? How can we support you in doing that? Because that language is important.
We used to have this thing. They're now mental health days in Australia. They're out of your sick leave, but within the profession, 2 decades ago, we used to call them doona days, where So, the doonas that are on your bed. So we would just call them doona days. And it's literally you would call in sick from under your doona, but all you were doing was you were actively protecting your mental health by staying in bed and taking a beat. But because we didn't have the language back then of talking about mental health, or it was you were supposed to wear it as a badge of honor that you were stressed and you were overworked and all of that kind of stuff. So thankfully, we've walked past that quite a lot, but it still exists across many workplaces. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a question in there about, thanking Adrian for his, shared lived experience and dealing with that kind of behavior from maybe a direct line manager. And it's how we also language it, which we can't when we're stressed unless we practice in good times. And it's that idea of, I'm feeling really stressed at the moment. It's like, well, that sounds like a you problem. Well, no, actually the situation that we're in and the environment you've created is stressful. And I'm experiencing the outcome of that. And when we are able to actually frame that, this is actually environmental, this is situational. Someone's just picked up a dump of waste and put it on our shop floor here, and you're making me breathe in the fumes of it. So I'm actually having a really appropriate reaction to the environment you've created. Changes up the view and perception of why we're stressed. Now, this is situational. This is environmental. This is the environment we've created. If I didn't experience stress from this, there would actually be something clinically wrong with me.
Yes, that is the other. So that's the other side for our profession is we have as a badge of honor our ability to cope.
Yeah.
And normalize situations that should not be ever normalized. And it's the more stressful and the more work we have and the more deadlines we have, and if we're working in crisis management, it then all ramps up even more. And you're also taking on the environmental triggers of if you're working in that space all the time. Nia, I'll come back to you, Adrian. I just wanted to swing to Nia. From your workplace experience, mental health and wellbeing, do you mind sharing from how you sort of approach it in your workplace?
Sure. So let me just share. This is something that I work for Accenture, and as a global company, everything comes from above in a way, but then we have to reflect based on what is happening in our locality. So we have this program called what we call as truly human, as we are human, and looking at the body, heart, mind, and soul. And this is something that it's like an ecosystem where the body provides like sustained energy, where we are physically energized, and our mind where we are resilient or mentally focused, and our heart that sustains belonging, and the soul that sense of purpose. So there are things that we can actually do to prevent instead of just curing those who have what we call mental unwellness. So this is something that we start because, as you know, as well as in Jakarta, I stopped sharing. So as in Jakarta, it's very high demand, and of course, similar to any Asia Pacific workplace, people don't leave the stress at the office, right? They also carry it home or to their families and communities, and vice versa. The stress that they have at home, they bring it back to the office, and this is something that we all have to deal with in a way. So we tried, at that time I was the inclusion and diversity lead at Accenture in Indonesia. And this is something that we try to work together within the community, the staff, as well as the ones who are managing the office, and also with HR. So how do we actually respect ourselves to be able to respect others as well?
And I think that's one of the topics that we were touching on, and we've Nia, Julie, and I, and Adrian, we've all had this conversation, is regardless of which country or culture you're in, there is there is a language that we have for the way that we talk about our feelings and our experiences and the way that we manage them. The language that you use, Nia, just in that slide, is very different and a different approach, but I love it because it's a prevention approach, and I prefer that than but it's also not the language that other cultures would use in a workplace setting. But the sentiments and the commitment behind it is very common.
Yes.
We just use it or come at it from a different perspective. I would say that that would look different maybe in the Philippines or in Thailand or Korea, or so everybody's going to come at it from a different perspective. And I think that what your experience of using that, Nia, how does that get taken up? How do people feel about when they see that poster and that commitment?
Yeah, I think the first time we were introducing this, people were like, do I really want to be involved in this? Because it looks like it's a lot of work, like addition to the work that we're doing, there's a lot of work that we need to do. But they understood about the body, because then it has something to do with you being physically energized to do the work and coming home still able to be with your family and that, right? The hardest part was actually mentally focused, because how would you be able to have, when you have so many things happening at the same time, how can you be mentally focused? How could you be learning, or you can have any innovations happening within your mind when you have so many things happening? So that was the most difficult part. And I think that at the end of the day, there's like that soul, a sense of purpose, where you actually need to be able to give to others instead of just asking. So to take and give in a way to not just within the office, but also within the community that you are in. So giving that sense of sharing. So that was it. But again, mine is the most difficult part, because the things that are in our head are something that we have had for ages, right? So it's not something that can be easily turned around.
No. Now I'm just noticing the time. We are almost out of time, which does not surprise me at all. This is a big topic. What I just want to, and we've touched on it as a concept, and I just want to kind of introduce it very quickly. In our workplaces, as Adrian mentioned, like on a construction site, but in any workplace, we understand the concept of physical safety. So, trip hazards, things where people can't physically injure themselves. It's the responsibility of the employer to make the workplaces safe. There's a concept, and it's an actual real thing, called psychosocial safety. So it's the exact same thing as physical safety, but it's psychological for our minds and for our well-being and for our bodies. In Australia, that has been legislated, and employers are now responsible and through criminal acts for their employees' psychosocial safety. And it means there's a whole lot of responsibilities and a whole lot of things that have got to go into HR and governance and frameworks and all the rest of it. But essentially, it is that you as an individual expect that the way in which you are asked to work does not injure your mental health or your psychological and social health. And if those practices do cause you injury, then the environment of the workplace needs to be adjusted or fixed so that it's not injuring its workers. It's as easy as that. But obviously, we're all human beings and we all work in complex environments with pressures and stresses and all the rest of it. So maintaining that psychosocial safety for everybody is a challenge, but it needs to be the central priority for the leadership of the organisation, central to the culture of the organisation. Because when people feel, as Nia has put out, they feel that they are thinking about their mind, they're thinking about their soul and their physical body and the other aspects, and they feel like they can do that with respect and safety and be supported to do that, do their best work, as Julie has said, is we want our workers, we want people to thrive because we are knowledge workers, we are sponges for information, we are conduits for information, we provide strategic advice, and we need to be as healthy and supported as we can be and should be in able to do that. There's so many things that are out of our control in the world at the moment, but having our workplaces have a culture of safety that supports us to thrive, and then by extension, the organisation thrives. That's what we're aiming for. Across the region, we all have different starting points at the moment with this. And what the Global Alliance is hoping through these kind of webinars and resources, that we can inspire and support you to actually build strong and thriving workplaces that are safe, and that you are culturally supported to put your hand up and say, if you're not doing well or something's not right in the workplace, that you can go, hey, can we have a chat about this thing, because it's really impacting what we're doing. And if we can't start with that as the starting point, then we really need to adjust our workplaces. So that's what we were hoping to raise with you today. I'm conscious of the time, and we did say that we'd do a hard stop. We haven't even got to all of the other bits that were on the list, guys. No surprises. What I would really like to, as the call out to all of you, the call out to all of you is we have a collaboration with the World Health Organization as the Global Alliance. They have free online self-led training for you all to access in 21 languages. The link to that is on the Global Alliance website. Please go and sign yourself up and go through those modules. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
I'm going to add to that, Jenny.
Yep,
just
Julie.
One thing to add to that. Also, in many of the countries that you're all in, there is access to mental health first aid training, whether it's as an accredited course or if you're doing it as blended without the accreditation. So it's available in that format to all countries, because we want to create accessibility to how do we do this thing. So I just wanted to add that that's also there and available for you too.
Great technical skills. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nia, Julie, Adrian. Thank you, Matthias.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Really appreciate you all.
It was an enjoyable session.
Thank you.